one solution for more than one thing. So we need not have.
So, this is we will have a whole session on redundancy later, but I'll briefly mention that redundancy, one of the very, very, very important concept in the way we know things.
Can we have all of them? That's what you were saying, something like a thing that can be used to several uses.
Right. So one of the things that many tropical or many traditional societies have evolved is multifunctionality. So one of the ways in which, so for example, the lock that we use, lock is not used only as a lock. Lock is used as a hammer, as a paperweight, as a nut breaker. You can imagine how many things we do with the lock. Sometimes we use it for every purpose other than locking. Correct? That is a trait. It's a trait. It's a cultural trait. It's a cultural trait. Multifunctionality is a cultural trait. Later on we will see that in sustainability, you cannot have sustainability without multifunctionality. Later on, in subsequent sessions we will see. But surely, multifunctionality is one. Social exchanges. If a guest comes, I borrow some sugar, extra sugar or something from the neighbor. At least people don't do it as much now, but they used to do, and probably some people do still. Correct? Suddenly there is a need, something, gas khatam ho gaya. So you will ask somebody, you have extra cylinder. Earlier when we didn't have extra cylinder, for many years, for about a decade, people had only one cylinder. And suddenly you have gas and cylinder has, so you have to request somebody who would have extra to lend you this. That is also one of the ways. That is also one of the ways. CPR is also one of the ways. But social exchanges have been one way in which redundancy can be reduced. If you can exchange, then if you can pool the inventories, then cost of redundancy can go down, which is a part of CPR. If you can pool the inventories, if everybody's individual inventory is available to me at the time of emergency or need, then I don't have to maintain enough stock of that resource. Because that's what community is all about. The pooled inventories of a community are accessible to each member of the community. So depending upon the variability in demand, they can draw upon each other's inventory. So everybody doesn't have to maintain extra stock of everything for an emergency, for a sudden guest. Very important part, very important part. So one of the ways in reducing variability was redundancy. Redundancy can be managed through multifunctionality, can be managed through social exchange, can be managed through CPR, and redundancy is also managed again over time and space. Redundancy can also be reduced by doing, as I explained earlier, probability analysis and finding out that more of something is not always better than less of something. So when you design vehicles, when you design any machine, you know that if you increase an extra engine or an extra part, there is a weight, there is a load, there is a friction, there is a fatigue. So you have to be very careful in how much extra you will keep. On space missions, you cannot keep everything extra. All right, let's come back to this point again. Now before I close today, I think in 2 minutes I should close because we have got to 10. I would only like you to reflect for tomorrow. What I intend to do tomorrow is to discuss different kinds of variability that emerge. Behavioral variability, structural variability, constitutional variability. They are all different kinds of variability. How systems are organized, constitutional variability. How systems behave, behavioral variability. How systems react, variability in the reactions, reactive variability. So there are different kinds of variabilities we will look at, and then see how technologies, institutions. So tomorrow we will see the relationship between variability, how has it been through institutions, culture, technology. Variability could be in resources, it could be in perception, all that we have discussed earlier. So on one side we will look at these, on the other side we will look at that and try to see how they are related. So some interesting dimensions will emerge that if you have an ostrich-like behavior, you don't want to see things, then the demand you make on dealing with redundancy is much lesser. So some people simplify their life by defining things very simple in a very binary terms, black and white. You are good or you are bad, isn't it? And when you define things in black and white, it looks simple because there is no variability other than black and white. Everything is good or everybody is good or everybody is bad. There is no third possibility. So decision is very simple. Good people talk, bad people don't talk. Now you don't realize that good people can become bad sometimes and bad people can become good sometimes. What do you do now? And then the other person says, but your rules are very flexible. Sometimes you talk to me, sometimes you don't talk to me. And then he said, but you know, I talk to good people. But he said, but then how come that you talk to me sometimes? Well, that time you are good. So how do I know when I am good? That's my decision. So Alice in Wonderland, that story you remember, you know, if you don't know where you want to go, any road will take you there. Alice in Wonderland, she says, if you do not know where you want to go, any road will take you there. No problem at all. There is no simple rule. So these simple rules actually can look very seductive, that you can make decisions very easily, but they are very complicated. They can make life very painful, and they can sometimes thwart the growth of societies for millennia. So we will also look at tomorrow some aspects of it. Slowly we will move into more empirical content as to how the societies, when they have dealt with variability, what kind of institutions they evolved. So what is the reason why technological change, why the Renaissance did not take place in Asia and took place in Europe? What was the factor? What were the factors when 500 years ago, it was not just separation of church and state, that is a simple, but there were many more forces. Leonardo da Vinci, if you read his book, his life, you realize he never completed anything. But he tried a lot of things. And how could he try a lot of things? How was the space given to him to try a lot of things? How did society tolerate so many different things that he could try? Some he did very well. A fraction, his notebooks, if you read his notebooks, and there's a lot of debate on his ideas, which he never developed, but he kept track of a lot of ideas. So this whole concept of keeping track of ideas, that societies which have made good progress, one characteristic they have, they keep track of ideas. Isn't it? Almost invariably. Whereas societies which have remained for long in a loop of stagnation, they didn't keep track of ideas. So we will look at how the Renaissance became possible because people started, but it did not happen 500 years ago. The oldest data that we have is 1400-year-old data set. And I'll just close on that. It's a very interesting observation. When the climate change discussion took place, people wanted to look at the longest time series of climate data. So the longest climate time series of temperature is the date of harvest of grapes in Italy. The grapes are harvested for winemaking at a particular time of growth, maturity. That temperature is very important. So that was recorded, the date was recorded for 1400 years in the local church. So that is the longest time series data that we have for 1400 years, the temperature data, by looking at the grape harvest date. So one of the things that we do for the variation is approximation, assumptions, approximations. We calculate a proxy variable which is very close to the reality, and then measure that. If they didn't identify that wonderful indicator, which is the date of harvest, which actually is date of harvest is very simple. You have to record that because that's the day wine starts making. But somehow intuitively they understood that this date is something to do with the weather, the climate. And then they started seeing the patterns when they had a lot of data. So then they started planning for it. now the time is going to come for grape harvest. Let us clean our utensils, let us keep our troughs, all those wooden caskets and everything, because they generated predictability. So we will see how variability and predictability, the oscillation of knowledge between variability and predictability is a very wonderful crucible of creativity. We will discuss it tomorrow. Thank you.